you'll get a notification. Okay. So good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the APS Leaders Institute workshop on supporting APS and adult services, the California landscape. We're here from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. My name is Rabaz. I will be your moderator and your tech support today. Here with me today is Dawn Gibbons-McWayne and Megan Juring, who will also be assisting. And then, of course, we have our panelists who we will introduce very shortly here. Before we begin, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items with you all. You all should have received a participant manual via email, but I'm also going to upload it here to the chat box in case anyone needs access to that. And just give it a minute here. It's just going to upload very shortly. All right. If you haven't done so already, please type your name, county, and title in the chat box so we can see who's all here today. All right, let's move on. So here's a little bit about the Academy for Professional Excellence, which is a project of the San Diego State School of Social Work. Its mission is to provide exceptional workforce development and learning experiences for the transformation of individuals, organizations, and communities. Adult Protective Services Workforce Innovations, also known as APSWI or APSWI, provides innovative workforce development to APS professionals and their partners. APSWI is a program of the Academy for Professional Excellence, along with all the others that you see listed on this slide here. All right, so now we'll get into our land acknowledgement. So the purpose of a land acknowledgement is to recognize the relationship of Indigenous peoples to the land. It is multifaceted in its meaning. It shows respect to the people of the land itself, and to the relationship to one another. They are statements that recognize the dispossession from the land and the harm brought by colonial practices, beliefs, and policies. They validate and recognize the continued presence of Indigenous peoples everywhere. Lastly, when offered in earnest and with sincerity, they are the first steps in reconciliation and healing. I'm placing a link in the chat for you all so you can see what land you're currently on. I am coming to you all from Kumeyaay land. So we'll move it forward. For millennia, over 100 tribal nations have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the Academy community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the original inhabitants of California. We also acknowledge that making a statement isn't enough. It's important that we also share ways people can take action to support Native American people and land back efforts. So while developing a land acknowledgement statement is an important step towards reconciliation and healing, the statement alone is not enough. It's important to also identify concrete steps and actions that can be taken. These actions can involve putting in time and effort to research and learn more about the Indigenous communities of the lands that you are on, returning artifacts and land to their appropriate tribal communities, working to protect and preserve the land, and much more. So I'm placing another link in the chat for you to see other ways that you can take action if you wish to do so. And I think I'm getting a little bit of background noise, so I'm going to go ahead and start muting a few folks. Okay. Moving on, an overview of technology. Many of you are familiar with navigating through a virtual learning course like this one, while some of us may be a little less familiar. So we're just going to review some of the various functions that we'll use during this course. First, you'll see your mic icon where you can mute and unmute yourself and also choose different audio options. Next is the video icon where you can share and unshare your camera. If you do have access to a camera, please turn it on so we can see your lovely faces this morning. Next is the participants tab, which allows you to rename yourself. If you see that your display name does not reflect your actual name, you can please change it. You can change it by just clicking on that participants tab, hovering over your name and selecting more, then selecting rename. We've also got the chat icon where you can participate via chat, via typing. Lastly, we've got the reactions tab where you can share different reactions like a hand clap or a thumbs up. If you are excited for today's training, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. And then just a few reminders, if you do need to step away or log off, please private chat me. Also, we may run into some technical glitches and we'll just work together to resolve them. We also will be utilizing breakout rooms today. We won't be recording the breakout rooms. You're able to leave the breakout room at any time as well. That is all for introductions. Let's see, is there any questions before we officially get started? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Dawn, and she's going to give an overview of today's agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabaz. Good morning, everyone. As you're joining, if you have not done so already, please put your name and your county and your title in the chat. So my name, again, Dawn Gibbons McWayne. I'm the program manager for APSWI, Adult Protective Services Workforce Innovations here at the Academy for Professional Excellence. And I'd like Megan for you to be able to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Juring. I'm a special consultant with APSWI, focusing really primarily on the APS Leaders Institute, helping to coordinate these trainings. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Megan. So we are absolutely thrilled to have you all here with us this morning for our very first Leaders Institute workshop of this fiscal year. The reason that we wanted to come together for this Leaders Institute workshop was really centered around a desire to support new leaders. So the topic, of course, for this workshop is learning about the California landscape. And the Leaders Institute workshops are also, in addition to learning the content and the topic of the workshop, the Leaders Institute workshops are always a wonderful opportunity to be able to make connections between APS and adult services colleagues here. As you all are very well aware, there have been a lot of changes in a very short period of time for APS and adult services. And also within a short period of time, there have been a lot of changes in leadership within APS and adult services. A lot of new APS and adult services leaders have come in, and that's why it was especially important this time to really, there was a desire among you all to really want to do more at this point to support our new leaders. So when you are starting out in at APS or adult services leadership, you've, I'm sure, all experienced a very steep learning curve. And while we have really wonderful structured training for new APS professionals, line workers, and we are starting to have good structured training for APS supervisors, we don't have anything similar to that for APS and adult services leaders. So, so I thought this would be a really great start in giving all of us a really good foundation on the California landscape, because it can be confusing when you first step in trying to figure out who's who and who does what. One of the real strengths of APS and adult services is just the amazing colleagues that you're surrounded by, and you can, just looking around all the little squares here. Just a really amazing group of colleagues here that you've got around you to support you and for connection and sharing. As I'm sure that you encounter APS and adult services, there are lots of strange situations that come up, and there's no one that understands what you're going through like your colleagues here. So the other important piece of this workshop, again, is really wanting to help foster those connections and exchange contact information so that you'll have a colleague to reach out to when those strange situations come up and you need to reach out and just talk to someone else about, have you had this happen before, or how would you handle this situation? So again, today we're here to talk about the California landscape, to get that foundation, whether you're new or very experienced. I'm sure that there will be something new that you'll learn from this. You can see we've got the agenda up here. So in a moment, we'll be moving into our panel presentation. After that, we'll have time for Q&A. So just as you're listening to the presentation, just as questions come up, just jot them down, because we have a good period of time with the entire panel for question and answer. Then we'll have a brief comfort break, And then we'll have an opportunity for a breakout group activity. And that's where you're really going to get the chance to connect with one another in small groups. Again, really encourage you to exchange contact information, to start getting to know one another. When you leave here today, that will allow you to have contacts and resources. You're also going to leave here with tools. I want to point out at the end of the participant manual, there's a worksheet that was put together. We got a lot of really great content from the Leaders Institute Advisory Committee. And it's kind of like a cheat sheet, like all the things that they wish that they had known or someone had kind of laid out for them about these are the things you're going to want to know when you're a new person. So start looking for this information and talking to folks and gathering this information. So that's a really wonderful tool that you'll have when you leave here today. And it'll help sneak preview. It'll help also bridge the gap in and move us forward to our next Leaders Institute workshop, which we're tentatively planning for September. And we're looking at that being a part 2 that will build off of the content for today. So that worksheet at the end of the participant manual will be a nice bridge from today's workshop over into September's workshop. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists. We've got a really wonderful and robust panel presenting today. We have John Hartmeyer from California Department of Social Services. We've got Nestor Lopez and Diana Boyer from CWDA. We've got Susan Gleason representing 20 Smalls, Deborah Martinez representing adults, and Emily Nickel representing PSOC. And I know I'm using a lot of acronyms, so they're all going to explain what all of these acronyms mean and how they all fit together. So with that, John, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're going to learn more about the California Department of Social Services APS unit. You're on mute, John.
No, I'm not. Well, I was about to say it's me and Hobbs the cat. So CDSS, the California Department of Social Services. First slide, second slide, please. There we go. Just some real quick legislative state code information. CDSS was granted authority for the operation of adult protective services with section 15753 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. And specifically, that gives CDSS the obligation to update policy and procedures, develop guidelines, provide technical assistance to the local programs, and primarily to be responsible for the development and oversight of training for APS. California's been operating adult protective services since 1984, but in 2011 was when the biggest change came in place with the realignment. The administration for APS was then handed to the counties, basically to make local agencies responsible for public services. Next slide, please. All right. So within the Welfare Institution Code, there are 3 significant sections that I want to share with you right now. 15751 obligates each county welfare department to establish an APS agency. Hence, that's why in California, there are 58 APS agencies. Here's a favorite one of all the counties. Section 15658 calls for each county to report each month to CDSS their collected data on the form that we create, which is the SOC 242. Now, a few years ago, with Chris O'Leary's is in this meeting. She was part of the very robust planning. We updated the SOC 242 to more closely align with the data that NAMERS is collecting. And we are starting to look at the possibility of updating the SOC 242 to coincide with the potential creation of a statewide case management data system. Now it's all preliminary, but this has just been marching orders that have been handed down to start looking into what it would take to update the SOC 242 to align with what Neighbors is asking on a case-by-case level. And then WIC section 15766 gives APS the authority to investigate allegations of abuse and provide case management. So that's a pretty big amendment to the WIC section that gives us the authority to do what we do. Now, before I go on, I want a little sidelight here. Anyone who applies for anyone who applies for a state of California position is always given the same advice from friends and who work for the state or others who have worked for the state is don't give up. Apply to as many positions as you can. Make your statement of qualifications literate. Understand various concepts that the state uses. Be patient because the state could be glacially slow in hiring, offering positions. Don't get discouraged and keep submitting applications. I think I interviewed for close to a dozen different positions, trying to get on with the state years ago, before Lori Della Grammaticas hired me 7 years ago as her become her loan analyst. She had been, well, I'll get to that in a second. I went into the interview with only a vague notion of what APS was, what it did, its role in the community. And I confessed that to her after she offered me the position. I said, I really don't know a lot about APS. And her comment was, well, that's okay, John. Most people don't. And that was kind of like our launching point together, because one of her missions was to make APS more familiar to the general population, like CPS has long been. And the state of California was behind her to a degree, and that's why they established a position with WIC section 15753 to establish one full-time position that assists counties in the operation of APS, and that person was Lori Della Grammaticas, who we all are very familiar with. She was the first APS liaison. Within her first year of the position, she hired me as her loan analyst, and so for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it was the liaison to me. Lori left to take over directorship of NAPSA, and Kim Rutledge came on as the second liaison. Next slide, please. And from there, we went from a liaison and one full-time analyst to a actual unit where we have liaison, now called the public administrator, James Chajari, a unit manager, which is me, and 3 whole analysts. So we are a full unit, and the work demands it. All right, so data collection. We all, well, I don't know if we all, the critical nature of data is what we manage and beg the counties to provide as timely as possible, because that's what's driving the increased funding we are receiving, the numbers. It's the demographic numbers. Population's getting older. Us baby boomers are now becoming the new retirement community, and we still have a huge political voice. We still have financial power. And so with the numbers that we're able to provide legislators and politicians, funding is starting to increase. We have created 2 data dashboards for people to access the data. One for the counties, which is the complete statistical analysis. Then we have the public-facing dashboard, which goes to the de-identification process. We are obligated to protect identities, and some of the smaller counties have numbers that are pretty darn minuscule, and it wouldn't take a genius to be able to break it down and figure out who is receiving services. And so with algorithms, our data people de-identify those numbers. And now we are looking at a way to make that dashboard a little more complete without sacrificing the de-identification process. But for now, anyone who wants to look at a data dashboard can, knowing that some of the data is not 100% complete because of the de-identification process. Next slide. Beautiful. So this was in 2015 when Lori's position was created, became Kim's position, and now Jim's position. Next slide. Here we go. So just to give you an idea of the growth of APS and what our responsibility are as being all of us in this room is, when Lori was hired, APS received about 176,000 reports of abuse that year statewide. When I was hired a year later, that number had grown to 184,000 plus. When Kim Rutledge came on in 2019, we were looking at 206,000 reports of abuse each year. COVID hit, numbers dropped for obvious reasons. And the last full year we have numbers for, we're looking at just about 199,000 reports of abuse that were received. Now, these are reports of allegations. These aren't necessarily confirmed, but these are the reports that we received. So you can see, and I guess obviously I'm speaking to the choir here because you all are very well aware, probably more than I am, how the workload is increased. Number of reports increasing exponentially each year. And there's a reason for that. We attribute it to multiple things. One, the population of vulnerable adults is increasing. Society is changing, economic situations change. There are more opportunities with the internet, with social media for bad players to take advantage of vulnerable adults. And I think another aspect of it is Lori's vision of increasing the face of APS and making it more known is working. I think more people are aware through various efforts of what APS does and doesn't do. Next slide. So, as you can see, since realignment, the numbers have steadily grown. Essentially, there's been a 190% increase in cases that APS has opened from 2011 to 2021. And as I spoke to a minute ago, the reasons are multiple. Obviously, a larger population base, more awareness. So I think the reasons are, if not obvious, are easily understood and explained as we collect the data and we look. And again, just so you know, the most common statewide in California, the most common form of abuse is financial, and that number keeps increasing. And as we all are well aware, it's not just financial abuse, but they get more and more involved and more difficult to investigate and deal with. It just gets more complicated as we go along. Now, next slide. With the growth of APS, finally, I keep every time I talk about funding, I think of Don, who, you know, and all the RTAs who for years had to survive on providing training to APS social workers on $176,000. That was what the state allocated for APS training. And that was divided between 3 regional training academies. So we were very creative in how we handled that. I'm going to wrap up very quickly here. So then, with the help of CWDA and others, legislation started passing where all of a sudden $11.5 million for training was provided. And of course, $9.2 million were then provided. And then of course, now the federal government's catching up, and we are looking at the prospect of federal regulations being passed, and regular annual federal allocations to California, not necessarily in the amount of the ARPA and the COVID grants, but I think it will catch up. And a lot of what we are doing is monitoring that. And I guess one real quick last comment is when I started with CDSS and APS, we oversaw 3 contracts over a 3-year period, totaling about $527,000. That's $176,000 times 3. Now we are managing 16 contracts totaling more than $41.6 million. So there is a great indication of the growth of APS and the acknowledgement of its critical role in our society. And that's it. I'm wrapped up, Rabaz.
Thank you, John. And now we are going to hear from Diana Boyer and Nestor Lopez with CWDA, the County Welfare Directors Association.
Thank you very much. So I'll kick it off, and then Nestor is going to take part 2 of our slides. And John, great information too on your slides. Just a wealth of data and information there, very helpful and amazing to see the growth in the APS program. So we're actually going to cover more focused around the association itself. Deborah Martinez, our co-chair of Adult Services, will focus more closely at the Adult Services Committee. So next slide. So you see our logo says CWDA, and it doesn't have our full acronym. We did a brand reset a few years ago. And so, wanted to focus on the CWDA, but of course, as was mentioned, it stands for the County Welfare Directors Association, not the Child Welfare Directors Association. We get that a lot. We're not about kids, of course. We're about families. We're about individuals, especially individuals who are older adults and persons with disabilities. We are the one nonprofit and association. We're a 501c4 technically, which allows us to lobby, that represents the human services directors from all 58 of our counties. We are, by the way, an umbrella organization, what we call an affiliate of the California State Association of Counties. So all of our county agencies, whether it's the boards of supervisors, our county execs, public health departments, behavioral health agencies, public administrators, guardians, conservators, we all tend to have our own different associations, and all of our associations represent the key staff in those areas. We all work in alignment with CSAC. So working very closely with them at the state level. And of course, you all work locally down with your own contacts. Our mission at CWDA is to promote a human services system that encourages self-sufficiency of families and communities, protects vulnerable children and adults from abuse and neglect. And we do this in a few different ways. One of our ways is we educate. We educate policymakers, we educate advocates. We are always talking about what services we provide, how we provide them, what our practices are. And we do at the staff level do that informed by our county program managers and administrators. We advocate. We propose legislative proposals, state budget proposals. We will respond to others' proposals. We are frequently responding and looking at the state's proposals and responding to their proposals. And we also collaborate and or talk to, I should say, other advocates who are doing their own proposals, and we may actually provide technical assistance to them. Even if we're not sponsoring something, we might help them out. And then we collaborate, and we'll talk a little bit more as we go through the slides, but we collaborate across counties. We collaborate across agencies. So for example, we are frequently working with CHEAC, the California Public Health Executives, with behavioral health, PAPG, just as a few examples. State agencies, we're frequently working not only with our state level agency, oversight agency, which is CDSS, John and his great group, but also with Department of Aging and Department of Healthcare Services primarily, and increasingly now with the California Department of Rehabilitation. Our former ombuds, our former APS liaison, Kim Rutledge, went to work over at the Department of Rehab, and it's been great working with her recently as well. And we also do have a federal lobbyist. We will work with some federal agencies, but largely we do that through our federal lobbyist. And then we also work with a number of stakeholder organizations. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slides. So let's go to the next slide. So CWDA has a long and rich history of leading in the APS program. In 1998, we sponsored AB 2199. That is the famous bill that established the statewide APS program in California. Prior to that, we had fragmentation. Not all counties were providing response 24/7. There wasn't uniform standards, policies, and services that would be provided. And we didn't really have a home in the WIC, in the Welfare Institutions Code. So we sponsored a bill at that point, and essentially created the statewide APS program. The next major piece of legislation after that was SB 1018 in 2005. And this was a battle to establish financial institutions as mandated reporters of financial abuse. We co-sponsored this proposal with the California Senior Legislature, CSAC, and the California State Sheriff's Association. After that, we collaborated with the California Elder Justice Coalition and the California Commission on Aging. Those two organizations you will see frequently. We frequently partner and work with them on legislation and budget proposals. And in that 2014, 2015 through the state budget process, we created a position as the APS liaison. We had the position funded through the state budget as an ongoing position, as a high-level position within the CDSS organization. Next slide. Then again, in 2016, 2017, again, partnered with California Elder Justice Coalition, the California Commission on Aging, and then we added a collaboration with the California Association of PAPG-PC, which just for mixing my words here. Just FYI, we also helped establish that association. We work very closely with them, with some of our own members who also wear that hat, to help them create their dues structure. They looked at our organization and said, you know, we really want to organize like you do and have a lobbyist. And so we were able to help them do that. And then we were able to co-sponsor a proposal which got funding for APS as well as for them, since they have an annual requirement to have training. And that training program started in 2016, 2017. And then it was at that point a 3-year sunset program. So between those years, then the next time we co-sponsored something, it was to establish the Home Safe program, which is the housing program for APS clients. And then more recently, AB 135 was a budget trailer bill that we partnered with Justice and Aging this time to increase funding for the APS program. We got another $70 million state general fund. We expanded Home Safe. At that point, There was a great amount of expansion across all housing programs because we had a significant amount of one-time funding in the state budget. So we were able to significantly expand Home Safe. And we were able to expand the population that we serve in the APS program to 60 years of age. And the theory behind that expansion was that it was so critical to get services to those before they were facing more severe neglect and abuse. And so working a bit more upstream for those populations that we felt like we could serve at an earlier stage and help them and protect them. So next slide. I appreciate this is going to be a very difficult slide to read. But the point of this slide is to show you what our structure is at CWDA. So we are led by a president and have an executive committee. CWDA meets on a monthly basis. We take a couple of months off. July is our next bi-month. And in October, when we have our annual conference. But we have a pretty set meeting structure where we generally meet the second week of every month. I say that, of course, June and November are exceptions because of just sometimes how the first Friday in the month falls, and with holidays, we might push into what looks like the third week. We have our major committees that will meet. And then all that feeds up. So if you look kind of from bottom up, the subcommittees, committees, and there are, I will say, more committees and subcommittees than are listed here. For example, many of our committees may choose to have a subcommittee that reports to them, but this is the official structure that we recognize. And what this is intended to do are conversations that happen within the committee, and Nestor will talk a little bit more about that. But all of this feeds up towards our board and our executive committee. And the point of this and the important takeaway is that CWDA strives, and I think we do a pretty good job of acting as one voice on behalf of 58 counties. You can imagine that we have 58 counties, 58 different ways of doing things. And that flexibility is a great strength to California. The size and the complexity of our state necessitate that we have a state overseen but county administered set of programs and services that can be structured in a way that honors county individuality, county resources, county strengths, but ultimately, at the end of the day, for our own advocacy, it is so critically important that we work together as one voice when we advocate to the state, to the legislature, and to the federal policymakers as well. And this 58 county structure also allows us to share best practices and promote more effective practices, because we are always talking together in all these different forums about what counties are doing, how they're doing it. Sometimes we share strategies, information, and it allows us that conversation that then also is a two-way communication with our state partner agencies as well. Our executive committee meets with Kim Johnson, the director of DSS, and her executive level staff, which includes Leora Felicina, who's the adult services director, so John's boss, essentially. And so we also have our state's partners at DSS and DHCS regularly attending our board of directors meetings to give us the latest information and critical news and share, information and concerns with them. So next slide. So I think this is my last slide. So in addition to advancing APS policy, we regularly meet with human services directors and program managers at our monthly meetings, and Nestor will take it from here.
Thanks, Diana. So hi, everyone. Just want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Nestor Lopez, Deputy Director for Aging, Disability, and Older Adult Services at CWDA. This is a relatively new position that CWDA created as of November of last year. And I'm very happy to be working alongside Diana and all you folks in helping to advocate and advance the work that you all do. So if we could move on to the next slide. So I'm going to give an overview of some of the relevant committees. And I know that all the folks here from PSOC, adults, and 20 Smalls are here. So I don't want to steal most of their thunder, but just want to go over some of the work that we do as CWDA to help advocate with these committees. So PSOC, this is a monthly meeting for APS managers to discuss their work in APS with other counties, our staff here at CWDA, and the state. And again, like Diana mentioned, these meetings just help the attendees understand how state policy is working or isn't working in practice, and allows us to take feedback back to the state for improvements, feedback to other counties for improvements, share and collaborate, and work together to ensure that our programs run as smoothly and as effectively as possible. And again, it's an opportunity for counties to request knowledge and support from their peers. And in addition to that, PSOC, 20 Smalls, adults, they all have their own subcommittees and work groups that are working to advance and provide recommended guidance to their members and as well as the state. So I know for PSOC, I want to mention that we do have our consistency guidelines to supplement regulations that our work group in PSOC does work to update periodically, and we actually just finished the latest set of updates thanks to Achilles Cerrone out of San Francisco for leading that effort in our PSOC committee. You can see those were recently updated on our CWDA website yesterday. So next slide, please. Again, 20 Smalls. 20 Smalls can elaborate more on their role, but wanted to make sure we acknowledge them here. So they are a committee consisting of representatives from the 20 smallest counties in California. Again, don't want to steal their thunder, so we'll move on to the next one. And then Adult Services Committee. So this is our big umbrella committee for all of our adult services topics. So as you saw on the org chart, PSOC and long-term care operations reports out to Adult Services Committee. Very happy to have Deborah here, our co-chair of adults. So she will be providing you more details on the specific work that the committee does. But just as a quick overview, we meet monthly to discuss topics pertaining to adult services programs, including IHSS, APS, and now housing and homelessness as well. Next slide, please. And in that committee, we do work to review new program guidance and best practices that either are developed in-house among counties or provided to us from the state. CDSS Adult Services Branch Leadership does attend the meetings to provide program updates and collaboratively discuss key issues in all of our programs that affect our adults. And then one of the things that the committee does do is elevate hot topics and topics of interest to our executive and our board committee. Next slide, please. So just to go over our role at CWDA in these committees and for you all that are attending, we're here to support the county program staff. We're here to take any and all questions on program guidance and interpretation of policy, from state policy to federal policy, and provide feedback to the state on those proposed changes to statute, regulations, and policy initiatives. We help organize work groups with the state and with advocates to co-develop sound policy and ensure that counties have a voice in the room whenever there are proposed changes to any policy that will affect the work that you all do. Want to let folks know that we're more than happy to meet with you individually to learn more about your individual role at the county and how we can best support you in getting the work that you do done. And next slide, please. Again, here are our contact information. So you can reach us both by email. We're both very responsive, and we'll try to get back to you within the next 24 hours of your email. Depends on the time of year and the season. Like right now is budget season, so we've been diligently working to make sure that the budget plays out in all of our favor. But again, Please don't be a stranger. More than happy to meet with you all, even if it's just for a quick 15 to 20-minute Zoom conversation just to get to know each other. We are more than happy to work with you all. So I think that does it for our CWDA section. Diana, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you so much, Diana and Nestor. And you've done the perfect job of teeing it up now for the committees. So we are now going to hear from Susan Gleason from the 20 Small Counties Subcommittee, which is commonly referred to as 20 Smalls. So over to you, Susan.
Thank you. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? I am the program manager of the Adult Services Unit here in Calaveras County. And, you know, the 20 Smalls Committee is, it's an executive committee. Our director, it's for directors, so our director attends these meetings, but, you know, I do check in with her. We kind of talk about things that are going on, things that they've discussed. So it's a small committee, so we have, you know, just a few slides here, but go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is a subcommittee within CWDA. It consists of the directors and the small counties. Here is a list of all the small counties. Corey Allen, our director, she is a representative of the 20 Smalls. I know that she said they haven't been meeting as regularly as they had hoped. Things have been kind of crazy, but they try to meet monthly to kind of go over, you know, different things that small counties face. I think the important thing that I would like to get across to anybody who is new, who's trying to understand or just learn. I know when I first started attending some of, you know, like going to long-term care ops or any of the meetings, is that, you know, every county, they face different challenges, and kind of understanding that and to ask, because I know that when I first started going to, you know, long-term care ops, you know, I would hear things from other counties. And I can remember thinking at times, like, we've never dealt with that, because, you know, counties face so many different things based on their county and, you know, their resources. You know, I know in Calaveras County, being a small county, I mean, like, we don't even have a homeless shelter in our county. And so that's a challenge for us. And so, you know, I think the biggest thing, you know, my takeaway is don't be afraid to ask questions, you know, reach out. Because like I said, you just never know, you know, what you might be facing. You know, another county, I reached out to another county recently with some questions, and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked, because, you know, I was facing those challenges and I didn't really know if anybody else was facing those challenges. So I think the important piece is just, you know, reach out, ask questions, because you just never know what's going on in other counties. And it's informative. It's really informative to ask questions and go to these committees to get information, because when everybody is sharing their information, you know, you kind of get some guidance or direction, and you sometimes feel like, okay, I'm not alone in some of this stuff. So that is that. So we can kind of go to the next slide. And I think I have 3 slides here, so we'll be quick. So the goal of the 20 Smalls is to meet regularly to discuss, you know, policy, financial issues, anything that could be affecting small counties. You know, if you're looking at different funding, you know, everybody gets sometimes different fundings. Like, you know, we want to make sure that the small counties are heard, that, you know, they get a rural viewpoint of kind of what's going on. I know one of the, you know, I think examples here that Corey had mentioned is, you know, when we do the PIT count, kind of looking through the lens of a small county versus a large county. You know, in Calaveras County, I mean, we are so spread out that trying to go out and, you know, go out to our unhoused population and trying to find them. I mean, they could be in the backwoods somewhere, you know, kind of spread out. So it's, you know, it's going to look really different for every different county. They look at legislative rules, regulations, trying to look at things from a rural viewpoint to just make sure that we kind of don't fall through the cracks. Again, that we're heard, advocate for funding methods to meet small county needs. You know, we have a lot of people Like I think our aging population is consistent of about 30% of our population. We have a lot of people who move up to our county because they want to retire, and they're happy and healthy at 65, but then they realize at 85 they live in the backwoods somewhere, they can't get to doctors, maybe a spouse has died, their children live far away, and then how do we meet those needs for them? How do we get them to the doctor? How do we sometimes it's an hour drive just to get to a grocery store. So always looking at how can we meet the needs of our clients. It's beautiful up here, right? We love it. Calvert County, it's beautiful. It's just it has its challenges. So and then like Corey mentioned, often small county leaders, they wear multiple hats in their position. I think when her and I met, she was working on coming up with a lease for a building. She had to write a lease for a building that she needed to get a contract through. So, a lot of times, we often wear multiple hats. I know for me as the program manager, I oversee, veterans, public guardian, public authority, IHSS, APS, and our senior peer program. And so I'm kind of all over the place. And then, looking at trends, assessing trends, the variations between large and small counties. Again, you're going to hear different things from different counties, things that are happening. And, once you kind of start seeing those trends and looking at the different lenses, you really can kind of see the challenges that large county faces, small counties face. And yet we have some of the same issues, but also different. And so I think just making sure that, the small counties, again, they're heard. How do we meet the needs of small counties and just make sure that we can serve our population effectively. And I think with that, that's kind of my 20 smalls.
Thank you so much, Susan. When the Leaders Institute project first started, 20 Smalls was one of the committees that I learned about that I hadn't known about before. And 20 Smalls the representation from 20 Smalls has been so helpful and invaluable in bringing in the voice of the smaller counties to inform the Leaders Institute, and just making sure that we're sharing the experience of all of the counties, small, medium, and large. So thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Deborah Martinez representing the Adult Services Committee, which is often referred to as adults.
Word. I always think it's kind of interesting how we can lump so much into one word, adult services. Appreciate everybody's time today. And a lot of what I could say has already been said, but then sometimes things can go quickly if you're not familiar with the subject matter. So I might repeat some of it. We go ahead to the next slide. So we just going up again in regards to what is APS and what's the role of adult services. So as you've already understood, if you're associated with these programs at all, it's the investigation of the alleged abuse and neglect. And yes, it's getting worse. And it's because also we are getting older. There's more of us older. There's less of us with connections. And then we have a backlog of those kind of situations, which are a little worse now because of the fact that we were locked down during COVID. So there's a lot more work going on right now for lots of things that are a lot more serious than they were previously. I have to say that. And then, yes, we need to educate the community. We need to be on social media. We need to be providing campaigns, and we need to be providing health fairs and things that inform folks about what's really happening in their community, because oftentimes they think it doesn't happen here because we're all great people. And unfortunately, they don't realize what is happening and who is the most likely perpetrator of that kind of abuse, which is a family member. And then the IHSS program is also associated with us because that's the number one way for us to be able to provide services for in the home for folks that can still be in the home and not have to go in any kind of a situation they're not happy with, which is an institution of some sort. But in general, that's adults. Now, in most counties, we wear different hats, as Susan mentioned. So you could also end up with being the public guardian, public conservator, and public administrator, which is what I am for Madera County. By the way, Deborah Martinez, Madera County Director. So I've been with Madera for 6 years as a director and 20 years with Fresno County, wearing different hats in public health, social services, self-sufficiency, mostly, and administration. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So the adult services is one of 8. Now I know you can count those little boxes and you say, wait a minute, there's more than 8. And yeah, there are. So we're not real official about those committees. They all have an agenda. They all have something they know to do. And that's really the point, not the count. They're generally facilitated by directors who co-chair. Adults is a little different. We're unique. And so we have the privilege of having Jill Nielsen from San Francisco, who's a deputy director and on the line, I believe, who also serves as a tri-chair for us. So Jill, believe me, you are more than welcome to state anything that I missed, which will be plenty. So we talk in terms of adult services, we talk about APS. There's a reference, of course, of adult. We have our CalFresh, CalWorks Children's Physical, in-home support services, information technology, and the medical care services are the most, I'm not gonna want to say significant, but I would say long-standing committees with CWDA, and then of course we have the REI and other committees that have come up since then. But adults is very important, and it is a growing area of policy and somewhat concerns and funding. So we'll go on to the next one. So there goes with the chairs. And so Deborah, Randy Morris from Santa Cruz is a co-chair, and Jill Nielsen is actually our tri-chair. You know, actually, when I was going, I should go back one slide, but when we talk about all the different subcommittees, remembering that adults, when they're involved with us with APS, very often they're involved with CalFresh, they're involved with MedCal. And so we need to serve them completely, right? We go out there, we find out, well, it's not, it's maybe self-neglect, and we need to address things. So we always have to remember that we are self-sufficiency and not just protective services, because we generally need to serve the child, the person, you know, 360, whatever the needs may be, or at least refer them to services if we aren't able to assist them directly. So those other committees, we're not a silo. Those programs come up on a regular basis when we're dealing with adults. Next slide. So we've numerous advancements have happened because of adults, because of CWDA, and with a strength, with a very strong association it has been. I know when Diana was talking about it and about what their role is with committees, but one thing that I don't know if it's stressed enough is just the political component. There are times where we may not be real politically correct about our feelings about changes or requirements or funding levels. And it's really helpful to have CWDA, who has these one-on-one relationships with the heads of these departments and these directors, and understand also the role of CBOs or community-based organizations, and what could be those compelling issues that are resulting in these requirements and maybe even funding shortfalls. So the role of CWDA with our committee made up of county folks is really critical, because that political part, that understanding of what we should raise and what's being already addressed, and or even advice of exactly how we should raise it, is very important. The other thing that CWDA didn't mention, but they're really critical on, is that methodology of funding disbursements. So sometimes, you know, the state's going to say, these are the amount of dollars you have, and then depending on what type of allocation it is, you know, CWDA is left with the ability to go ahead and determine with their membership of directors what's the best methodology in order to actually distribute those allocations. So they play a critical role in that regard as well. Okay, we can go to the next one. So these are the standing agenda items for us in adults. So we have PSOC, or the Protective Services Operations Committee, the Long-Term Care Operations, Adult Protective Services Leaders Institute for the training. California Department of Social Services comes every month. Our representative is not the director. California Welfare Directors Association, of course, are in attendance and facilitating as well. The legislative committee report that we get from Chris is online too. The Child Family Policy Institute of California, or CPIC, that are now doing trainings in just about every area that we have. The Homeless Services Committee, which is new, and then 20 small California counties. So let me start with the 20 small. We added that item as a standing agenda item a few months ago. Actually, it's been probably 6 months now. And that was actually because of Corey. She came and when she was voicing things that were really relevant to small counties, and we thought, well, you know what? We should just have a standing item. And so that we can ask Corey if there's anything that's standing out specifically to small that is going on that you would like to report out on. And I know they're incredibly busy, so it hasn't been as robust as it started off being, but I know it'll come back. I think what Susan also mentioned, that wearing lots of hats, and I'll bring that up again, is when you're looking for resources, it's good to go to about the same size county as yourself. I think it's the most helpful. The reality is if you're a large county, you are specialized in lots and lots of ways. So folks will say, well, you know, I have this many people. Yes, and that generally means that they're all specialized in one way or another. We're in medium-sized county, you've got to know A to Z. And if you are a small county, you have to know A to Z, Z, Z. And so that's very helpful to know, because if you are a manager and you're a manager in a large county and you think, well, any manager would know that, whatever question you might have, you would go along it. You know, you need to be realizing the other large counties are most likely specialized as well. And it's going to be a particular manager you need to talk to, and you got to figure that one out. But so these kind of associations are helpful, and I think it's always really helpful to go with your match county if you're looking to see who is your counterpart that would maybe be able to help answer whatever questions you might have. I think it's of all those folks that think that small and medium, that means the workload is small or medium, not the case whatsoever. I can tell you that I work so many hours, I'm working McDonald's pay. So at any rate, these are the agenda items that we have. We do have minutes, and generally our adult services, I know there was a mention of deputy directors, but we do have supervisors, managers, and deputy directors that attend. The reality is sometimes it's filling for somebody who's not able to attend, but again, the makeup of the county, right? In some more counties, maybe all you have right now is a supervisor taking care of everything. So it really doesn't matter. It's whoever needs to know the information. We just have to have, you know, having a representative for the county is really, really important. Most of the meetings are hybrid, and we have a couple that we've said, you know what, I mean, of course, we have 2 months a year that we do not meet, but then we have a couple of times a year that we've determined at this point anyway to require in person, which I think is fun. And then the rest of them are hybrid. Which at our next meeting is actually this Thursday, and it will be hybrid, so I'll be second. But these are the standing items. There is minutes, and we have minute takers. So if you know who it is that goes to adults, or you don't, you can ask us. And it's always kind of helpful to look at the minutes. I mean, those always are available. And I think it's very interesting to see what's happening, and having that direct contact with CDSS, I think is really important, and learning from one another, because as Esther says, PSOC and other companies come up with things that are best practices, and it's really, really helpful to hear it firsthand, but if not, at least look through the minutes. Also, there's systems that support our programs, right? So Grace comes in and provides us some information about CMIPs and tells us, you know, what's been identified as an issue or an improvement, and comes in with change requests and has to go on with accepting the change, and that kind of information is provided to us as well. So that's pretty much what I'm going to say about that. Go ahead and go on. So that just gives, again, what each item does, like the long-term care ops. You see how it talks about CMIPs? That's when we're hearing from Grace, is generally when we're talking about long-term care ops. CWDA does their role, provides us all the information about what they know about legislative information and budget items. They also tell us what they've already spoken to the departments about, and what we might want to focus on, or what will be addressed in a future meeting. So not to worry. The legislative committee, which is made up of CWDA members, or let's say county members. Chris is who is with us today. She is our representative on the legislative committee. So she, along with the CWDA staff, tell us what's going on with any kind of bills that we're most interested in, whether because we're in high support or because we're concerned, either way. Then we have CPI PSC, which looks like it's misspelled. That was me. I'm sorry. And we talk about our homeless programs, which are ever increasing, and our homeless activity that's ever increasing but unfunded. And then 20 small. Now, the only thing that I was going to say about 20 small is, again, a lot of the focus on the 20 small is not just, what pertains to them specifically, but also on the funding is really, really important, as Diana and as everybody knows. We've talked about is the fact that a lot of times they're not opting into things that are voluntary or having a hard time doing what's mandatory because the funding that is being provided isn't sufficient to actually have them create a position to do that function or to oversee a program of that size, right? So they need a minimum amount to be able to grow staff, because if they only get an allocation based on their size of the population to be served, they can't add a person to do that work. So that's a unique situation that 20 Smalls has, and it's self-perpetuating situation where they're underfunded. And so that's very, very important. It was another reason why they were added to our as a standing agenda item, and it's a focus of ours in just about every conversation.
From Emily Nickel.
Hi, thank you so much, everybody, for showing up. I don't know if you can make it smaller, but like part of the slides are cutting off.
Okay.
And
Oops.
there's a chart that I would like for people to be able to see. So while you're working on that.
Is that better, Emily? Is that a better view?
That could work also. It's if you stop right there. Anywho, well, oh, okay. Patrick says it wasn't cutting off on any part of the slide on my end. So maybe it's just me. That's okay. Anyway, my name is Emily Nickel, and I'm a program manager with Monterey County, and I have been overseeing IHSS for about 6 years, and just started with APS and the intake for APS and IHSS in the last couple of years. So I'm actually relatively new to PSOC, but can certainly speak about how helpful it has been to me in learning more about the APS programs. So PSOC, the Protective Services Operation Committee, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. That committee is, I actually realize I have the, my slide is wrong. I learned all about 20 Smalls today. I didn't know very much about them. And 20 Smalls should probably be floating above because they incorporate much more than just adults programs. But PSOC is one of the committees for CWDA adults, along with long-term care operations. And for PSOC, that is often attended by APS program managers, but there are also supervisors and program specialists and analysts who attend that meeting. And so if you look on the within PSOC, there's a couple of different groups. So on the left-hand side, you have the regional PSOC committees. PSOC meets once a month with a couple of exceptions. And then these PSOC, regional PSOC committees also meet once a month. And they are broken down into these 4 categories: Valley, Mountain, Southern, Northern, and Central. And we, at our PSOC meetings, we get report outs from each of those regional committees. And then if you look on the right-hand side, those are the work groups that we have. So, and they're very active. The regulations work group, that's actually, I believe that's the work group that originated the the APS standards for consistency in determining findings. That definitely came out of PSOC, but it was before my time. But I refer to that document all of the time. And between the regulations work group and one of the PSOC committees, they're working on consistency in supervisor reviews. So that'll be the next thing that we come out with out of the PSOC committee. That'll be really helpful, especially for new supervisors. The leadership development committee is actually the committee that helped come up with this training today. And so we work with the Leaders Institute to develop trainings that we think that the APS management would like. The legislation committee tracks different bills that are pertinent to adult services. And oops, I put the supervisor review process. They're kind of like combined but separate. But the supervisor review process is the one that's currently getting the most action. But one of the work groups that has now disbanded but was very helpful was a work group that created a repatriation guidebook. So if you're especially in one of the southern counties who gets a lot of people, especially coming from Mexico, who need to be repatriated and they're senior or dependent adult, there's a very detailed guidebook about that. And again, that was developed straight out of PSOC. Next slide, please.
Rabaz's screen's back up, so I'm going to stop sharing and Rabaz is going to bring the slides back up.
All right, thank you. So PSOC is a great place for APS county leadership to get together and talk about different policies and programs, especially home safe is definitely a hot topic right now, because while there were many pilot counties, some of us, like Monterey County, are just now rolling out home safe, and we have a lot of questions. So it's been really helpful to bounce ideas off of other county staff to see what worked for them. We talk about funding sources, legislation, different trainings, and it's also a great opportunity for APS leadership to talk with the CWDA staff. Nestor is pretty much always there. Diana is often there from CWDA, and they provide a lot of great information, updates on legislation and budgets. CDSS staff is there, and that's been really helpful to get really clear updates on what they're up to in terms of their contracts, etc. And then this is also a place where we can advocate for changes in policy or new legislation. At least once a year, CWDA prompts the counties to think of legislation that might be needed. And at least the last couple of years I've been here with PSOC, there has been legislation that has moved forward out of PSOC that was originated by a specific county, but it was discussed and kind of hashed out some in the PSOC committee. So that's been really cool. So next slide, please. So these are some agenda topics we always have on there. As I said, CWDA always presents, CDSS presents. Some of the things they've been particularly talking about lately is the helpful financial abuse reporting online tool that will be rolled out this fall. They've been talking a lot about technical assistance for home safe and how to access it. Asking us to make sure we spend all of our COVID money. Please do that. And then talking about any kind of trainings that are being offered. All the work groups report out on their activities. All of the regional subcommittees report out. And then there's county discussion time. So you can ask for a specific agenda item to be placed on the agenda, and we'll talk about it as a group. And then finally, we talk about what we want to elevate to the adults committee, things that we're really concerned about regarding the APS program. And next slide, please. So a few things to just be aware of with PSOC. Oh, the meetings are right now, they're almost all virtual. And we did have an in-person only meeting this month in June. We'll probably have one more at the end of the year. We actually I haven't seen a hybrid one yet. Or we did one last year, I think. So we're still kind of working out what that's going to look like. But for the most part, they are virtual meetings. It's always the first Thursday from 9:30 to 12:30. And if you can't make it at that time, at the very least, get on the email distribution list, because you are going to get the report outs from CDSS. They've been creating really helpful PowerPoints with their details. You'll get legislation information, policy changes. You'll get surveys from Nestor if we're trying to kind of come up with what are the county's recommendations on certain policy. So it's at the very least do that. And so I added the PSOC co-chairs email information, Carrie Aldava and Jason Kempfany, who would be happy to add you to the list so you can get all of that great information. One of the other great things is that you get to establish what I call a brain trust. So especially when you can go to in-person meetings and really get to know people better. And we have been having breakout rooms in the virtual meetings, which is nice, but you get to know people, potentially same size counties, that you appreciate their feedback, and you can just email them when you have any kind of questions. And I have to put in a really big plug for PSOC, because they just saved Monterey County $15,000 because I went to the PSOC meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the LEAPS. The LEAPS was going to charge $5,000 a year to have an interface with Helpful, and we had to do our contract starting in July, but Helpful isn't even going to be turned on until October or later. And we had originally thought, oh yeah, let's just go ahead and do it, but that's money going to waste when we can just go back and do a contract amendment later if we really have a high volume. So thank you to those of you. All the other counties said, no, we're going to wait. So that was really helpful. And you'll just get to know people, learn who you can contact with questions, especially CWDA and CDSS staff. And one last thing, give yourself some grace around the acronyms. It took me probably a year to figure out that ACL does not necessarily mean all county letter. It means sometimes the Administration for Community Living, which I had never heard of. But that's an organization through the Department of Health and Human Services that provides fundings and support for programs for seniors. So, and it's okay to just ask the question in chat too. And I think that's the last slide.
Thank you, Emily. I know that comes up with PA too. Like, are we talking about public administrator or public authority? Like, which PA, which ACL are we talking about in this context? And just since you have mentioned acronyms, I want to point out in the participant manual on page 25, there's a link to the APS TARC's New Administrators Toolkit. And as part of that, there's a whole section about acronyms. So, feel free to refer to that to help you with learning all the acronyms. So thank you so much, Emily. And now we have an opportunity for Q&A, a really unique opportunity here with representatives from CDSS, CWDA, and from the committees. So what questions do you have? There are no stupid questions, whether just like on the 2-question survey that you may have filled out, whether you've been here a long time or a short period of time, there are likely questions that you have and have not maybe had the opportunity to have this group of folks here to be able to ask your questions. So you can feel free to come off mute and ask your question aloud, type your question into the chat, raise your hand. So what questions do you have for the group here? as you all are thinking, I have one question. Can people attend more than one committee? Are there folks that participate in more than one?
I could take that question. So yes, there are people that participate in more than one. Our committees we prefer, and Deborah was chatting about this earlier in her presentation. For the Adult Services Committee, we prefer the directors of adult programs. We have long-term ops and PSOCs chairs, at least one or at least a liaison, as well as legislative committee from our legislative committee. And I saw Chris Brown was on this Zoom. We will have certain others that are also representing other committees come on. Deputies can designate a lead staff person. With our PSOCs and long-term ops committees, we want the program manager, as Deborah also noted, like depending on your county, you may not have that title per se, but you have the role, right? So it's really important that you have like the highest level role. We try to, we encourage just the leaders to come, and it's been, I will share a challenge in the hybrid environment. In a meeting room, and before COVID, our folks there would be like anywhere from 25, to 40 folks in a room. And we see sometimes upwards of 80 folks on a Zoom, which is just too many. We are most effective when we have people participating in our meetings, when they're talking, not when they're there to listen. And so our committees are working committees. There are opportunities for CWDA staff to be informed on policies and what we need to advocate for on your behalf. And there are also opportunities for you all to network and to learn from each other. And so it isn't an open, I will say none of our committees are just that widely open. Now, certainly our co-chairs can set some standards of participation, and we allow them that space to do that. But we are most effective when we have sort of the more, focused leadership that's able to give us direct information. And sometimes the more people you have in the room, the less people want to talk. And so that's always, and, we can't always control who's on a Zoom. We try to, but we also do worry, like our meetings are confidential. They are not open to the public. We will have time and space when we have some presenters, special guests. I will say our training partners are in the meetings, and we always appreciate that because it is helpful for them to hear what's happening when they're in developing curriculum and such. But otherwise, it's important to have a safe space for us to talk together about our trials and tribulations and the challenges of implementing these very complex and very in demand and growing programs. I'll stop there and see if anybody would like to add.
I can add that I have sometimes gone to both ops and PSOC, and they're often back to back, a 4-hour meeting on Wednesday and a 3-hour meeting on Thursday, and that's a lot. So the other program manager usually attends ops, but I have filled in. They're both so good, and it is a lot. And they're both really active. I was very pleased to see how active PSOC was, and they just generate a lot of great guidance for the counties. And so it can also be really helpful to get in on one of those subcommittees and help develop that guidance. So you don't want to spread yourself too thin by being on too many larger committees, because the subcommittees can be really special to be part of as well.
Thanks, Emily. Is there anyone else that would like to add to that? That's very interesting, Diana, about the way that the committee has changed post-COVID and in the virtual environment. And then I hear what you were saying, Diana, and that linked back to something that you had said, Deborah, too, that within the committee meetings, it's an opportunity to really speak frankly and openly about thoughts and opinions and challenges. So it makes sense. Yes, Jill, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to all the panelists for presenting today. It's really nice to be hearing from my colleagues. I was just wondering for, those who've been chairing committees for some time, and I totally agree with Diana's comments, and I've been attending these meetings for many years, and there sort of been ebbs and flows in terms of engagement, participation. I think, during the pandemic, for example, people really were just trying to suck up information and maybe didn't have the energy to be contributing, to be participating. And I'm just wondering if, either to the panelists or maybe others who are here today, what has worked to try to increase engagement, increase participation, maybe even just from, meetings you may chair in your home counties. Because I think that is an area where we should be putting attention, but it can be challenging, just given sort of the nature of the purpose of what we're doing together. Everyone's coming from a different perspective. But we do really struggle to encourage people to speak up and to be, transparent and talk about what their challenges are. So any suggestions, I would love to hear them.
Well, Jill, as you know, we are trying to be hybrid as much as possible. And locally, the way that we get the most done is in person, because the sidebarring is just the best part of almost any meeting is what your sidebar. You can get the notes for the actual topics many times and collect just about everything you need, but the sidebarring is really, really important.
Absolutely.
Chris, do you have a separate question or do you have an addition on this topic?
Sort of along the same lines. I was actually just going to ask Diana Boyer if there's any discussion at CWDA about pivoting back to all in person rather than the hybrid.
Good related question. And I was, I wanted to others to chime in first for the committees, but I would say that it is still a choice for the the committees. Our executive board did not lay down the land in terms of what has to happen with in-person versus hybrid. I think that's a good thing as long as the technology allows for it. We have a couple of owls that we've purchased, those, little devices where you can go in a room, and we're able to use Zoom, which is really helpful. I think it's an easier app to use for meetings. But we're also pivoting. So adult services, long-term ops, and PSOCs have all had or are in process of having at least a minimum of 1 or 2 mandatory in-person meetings per year. So no virtual option for that. I think the challenge still remains of getting folks there. We had an in-person PSOCs last month, and I had hoped that we would have seen more people come. We got a good showing, but not a great showing of folks in person. So those remain challenges. As far as, and I don't know how to resolve for that. I mean, I think it's a good conversation because I do think that there could be county policies that say, if you can do Zoom, then the travel is prohibited. There could be county challenges that we can't control. And, there's benefits because, for example, 20 Smalls, we're able to get some of your counties into these meetings where it's been really challenging and difficult in the past. And we know that a lot of our programs are underfunded. APS a little less so, thanks to the influx of recent dollars, but IHSS certainly so. And some counties have crossover staff in both programs. As far as how do you get participation, you need good facilitators. That's really kind of the key. And I've made specific efforts to, I'll call on folks that I know are our thought leaders in our committees. Chris, Jill, Emily, I mean, you are them, right? You are folks that we often call upon. I see Valerie in the room, Julie from Shasta, names and faces we recognize that are so thoughtful and give such great feedback when we need it. So you know, being the teacher and calling on folks isn't hopefully terrible for folks, but that's some things that we have to do.
Thanks, Diana. Any other thoughts from the group about Jill's question on how do you build better engagement, or anything that you've tried or you've seen is working to help in terms of more participation and active participation and engagement?
So I do like the addition of the breakout groups that we started doing in PSOC, because at least there's 5 to 10 minutes in the very beginning where you get, it's probably three to 6 people in your group. That's been really helpful. And an idea to throw out there. So when we have done in person, there's typically been a group of us that figure out somewhere to go to lunch, and we go to lunch, and there can be some challenges with that in terms of getting the bills and all of that in the space. So might there be an option where a county could opt in for like a bag lunch, and they would like reserve it ahead of time or something like that, and there would be space set aside where people could eat lunch together, but it's less complicated, because eating together, sharing a meal together, is a really great way to connect.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and that's like the meeting after the meeting where, you know, everybody's there, and if you have that opportunity, yeah, can be a nice, more casual way to yeah, I like the idea too that you shared. Thank you, Emily, of the breakout groups. Because as Diana, as you had pointed, and in a group of 80 people, you know, it might feel really intimidating to speak up. Whereas if you're in a breakout group, you might feel more comfortable sharing. Other thoughts or ideas around the question of engagement, building more engagement and participation? And what other questions do you have?
Let me just add a little bit to this too. You know, we also have the regionals that meet, and we rely on those regionals to also be a two-way communication of, they will bring information from our, you know, CWDA meetings back to the regions, and then vice versa. And then we'll ask for regions to report out. And so that is also a different way of engagement, because then you're actually asking the regional co-chairs to, you know, to participate, and then they're also there to do that. So those regional co-chairs are so critically important and key, because our PSOCs and adults chairs and long-term ops chairs can't do it all, and we're 58 counties, right? We can't have the pulse on everything, and so we find out a lot through those regional communications. And we have regional report outs, or we have work group report outs. And so we often have leads on each of those, assigning or asking for volunteers, usually for work groups, to lead on things. This is where, again, we're working committees. And so that's another part of the whole engagement and communication strategy, right? Is like, if you have people doing work and you have certain leads in certain areas, and then at every committee meeting, we're having these reports. And then everyone sort of invites, like, did I miss anything? Please add to whatever I may have missed if you're on this particular work group, or if you're in this region. And that's where we get, I think, a lot of conversations going back and forth.
Thanks, Diana. Other questions or other input around that question? What have you always wanted to know? What questions are still kind of lurking in your head? Yes, Jill.
Yeah, it's been fantastic having Deborah as our chair in that role multi-year. So thank you, Deborah, for doing that. I always wanted to know a little bit about what that process looks like. I don't know, Diana or Deborah, if you can speak to it, how amongst the directors you decide who's chairing what committee.
Deborah, want to take it?
Well, it is voluntary, and there's sometimes pressure to do it, because folks are really, really busy. And obviously you have your regular job, and then you have you know, chairing, which is not bad at all. You have to have a really good executive assistant, which I do, Maria Benavides. And we, you know, it's about setting up a draft agenda, having a pre-meet and going over the items and discussing it and then facilitating the meeting itself. It's not bad. It's just, it's one more responsibility. So this is my second year. I thought I'd do it for the 1 year because if anybody's ever been familiar with child welfare, if you're not forced to focus on adults, you could spend all your time stressing for what's going on in child welfare. So I love that. When I came over, I wanted to make sure I made time to learn what was going on in adults. So I ended up doing it for this year as well. And we'll see what happens for next year. I think Randy's a real champion for adults. So maybe he'll want to do more of it. But yeah, it's a real pleasure to get to know everybody, and the work is great to learn from everybody, all the experts that are in the room. I noticed there's a lot of analysts. It seems like that enrolled in this class or this course, and I that's how I started. I was a welfare to work or job specialist, and then I went into administration, and that's where I grew up as an analyst. And I remember, it's all about having curiosity, and you never know where you're going to end up.
I'll just add too, because it is the similar topic, like, being in leadership positions. So it's true that it's volunteer. And we so greatly appreciate the time, effort, and energy that Deborah and others add, to their own, to be part of that, because we know that it can be work. We try to do as CWDA staff as much as we can to support Deborah and our chairs through the development of agenda items. We try to do some follow-up when needed. We do ask for the committees to, do their own minutes, and usually we rotate that, and there's a volunteer, and they could be super high level. They should not be more than really 2 pages, even 3 pages at the max long. But for those of you, and obviously there's a lot of names I don't recognize and faces, which is fantastic. So great to have such a strong participation here. There is great value in volunteering for chairmanships. This is less pertinent for our board, adult services, but really for like our subcommittees and any working groups. If anyone is interested in 2 things, one is if you're interested in advancing in any way in your work, it's a great thing to put on a resume or application that you are involved in policy development, cross-county work to improve and effectuate good practices. So it's a great opportunity also to network and, and meet other people across counties. And it's also, I think, a second driver is, you can make direct change from a statewide level on policies and practices. And so, and also just sort of practicing leadership skills, right? Because as a supervisor, as a manager, those are things that, you're very much with support get to do in sort of a practice way, in a different way. And there might be other benefits that I'm not, catching here or relaying, and I welcome others to share, but there are opportunities through our association and our many working groups and subcommittees to make a difference. And also it could be a win-win for you all.
Thank you for adding that, Diana. There were some questions that had come out of the 2-question survey that we had sent out in advance to help inform the content of this workshop. And there were a number of questions around professional development. So that's a really helpful nugget there that, being in a leadership role in one of the committees is really a great way, not only to impact change, but also to for your own professional development.
Well, fun fact, before I came to CWDA, and I've been here 18 years, and I like to say I've grown up, now I'm an adult at CWDA, I work with Sacramento County and I work with Santa Clara counties. And I was sort of appointed, or I got onto the legislative committee of CWDA before that. So I was able to kind of wedge my way in and got to meet the executive director and lobbyist at that time. Although I kind of met them, I kind of knew them from before from other work, but still was like, definitely that exposure and meeting people was just fun and fantastic. And I should add that we are always welcoming, like legislative committee is not the one that maybe stands out. And for this group, PSOC probably is your main committee, but and I don't know, Chris, if you want to share a little bit about legislative committee, because it is a great group to be part of. And it is actually a slightly more open committee in terms of who participates on that, although your own county might have a process of who gets on that committee. So I can't say that I can control what your county requirements are, but that committee welcomes members from all across our human service programs that we administer. So CalWorks, CalFresh, Medi-Cal, APS, IHSS, child welfare, and I think I got most of the major, childcare, forgot about childcare. Chris, do you want to say anything about legislative committee?
Yeah, so when I started attending, I think in 2017, there were maybe 4 or 5 people that were there to discuss adults bills, and the other 50 people were split up between child welfare and self-sufficiency. We would literally get sent to a little cafe in another part of the, like around the corner, because there was no room for us. So it's been interesting, just I would say in the last maybe 4 years, the bills coming through for adults, there are so many more. CWDA has been sponsoring a lot of adults bills in these last few years. So I feel like the trend is really moving in the right direction. But what I will say is that I'm one of just a few people that regularly attend the Ledge Committee